The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and betrayal. I'm Caroline, 28 years old, and I was watching my father's entire legacy be handed to the woman who married him just 2 years ago. To her, he left our home and his company. To me, a single wooden puzzle box. My step-siblings smirked, thinking they'd won. What they didn't know was that my engineer father didn't just leave me a box. He left me a weapon, and the blueprints for my revenge were carved right into the wood. Before I share the full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to go above and beyond for family. Believe me, you're going to want to hear what happens. I stood in the cramped office of Miss Hayes, the family lawyer, my hands clenched tight enough to leave crescent marks in my palms. The air smelled of old paper and lemon polish, and the weight of my father's absence pressed against my chest like a stone. Mark Reed, my dad, was gone, taken by a storm at Whispering Pines, our lakeside cabin in the Cascade Mountains. They called it an accident. A tree fell, they said, crushing him as he worked alone in the boathouse. I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. Miss Hayes cleared her throat, her sharp gray eyes flicking between me and Victoria Sterling, my stepmother, who sat across the table with her children, Ethan and Sophia. Victoria's face was a mask of practiced sympathy, her lips curved just enough to seem mournful but not enough to smudge her lipstick. Ethan, 22, slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone while Sophia, 19, inspected her manicured nails with a bored smirk. I hated how they filled the room, their presence loud in a way that made my grief feel small. "The will is straightforward," Miss Hayes said, her voice cutting through the hum of the radiator. To Caroline Reed, Mark bequeaths the puzzle box he crafted, inscribed with, "For Caroline, the cornerstone." To Victoria Sterling, he leaves Whispering Pines in full control of Reed Woodworks. My breath caught. The puzzle box? That was it? I'd expected something more. The cabin was my heart. Dad built it with his own hands, every beam and joint a testament to his love for Mom, for me, for the life we'd had before everything fractured. Victoria's hand fluttered to her chest, her diamond ring catching the light. "Oh, Caroline, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice syrupy. "It must feel like so little, but we'll cherish the cabin, I promise." I nodded, my throat tight. I couldn't look at her. Ethan snorted, not even glancing up. Sophia's lips twitched, like she was holding back a laugh. Miss Hayes slid the puzzle box across the table, a small, cedar-scented thing, its surface carved with interlocking patterns that only Dad could have dreamed up. I took it, my fingers tracing the inscription. The cornerstone. What did that even mean? That weekend, I drove up to Whispering Pines to collect Mom's things. The cabin stood against the lake like a memory made solid, its cedar walls glowing under the October sun. But as I stepped inside, my stomach twisted. Mom's peonies, the ones she'd tended with such care, were gone, replaced by a sterile gravel path. The mantelpiece, once crowded with family photos, Mom laughing, Dad's arm around her, me as a gap-toothed kid, was now bare except for a gaudy abstract painting. Victoria's touch was everywhere, erasing us. Ethan was in the boathouse, measuring it with a tape measure, muttering about a party deck. Sophia lounged on the porch, filming a TikTok, her voice dripping with mockery. "This rustic vibe is so last century," she said, panning the camera over Mom's old rocking chair. I wanted to scream, to tear the phone from her hands, but I didn't. I just carried Mom's quilts and books to my car, each step heavier than the last. That night, Victoria found me in the kitchen, clutching a mug of tea that had gone cold. "Caroline, dear," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. "We have to look to the future. Holding on to the past isn't healthy." Her eyes lingered on me, pitying, but there was something else there, something cold and calculating. I mumbled an excuse and fled to my old bedroom, the puzzle box in my hands. It was all I had left of him. The weeks that followed were a slow bleed. I went back to Seattle, to my engineering firm, where blueprints and steel beams made sense in a way people didn't. But Victoria's family made sure I couldn't escape them. Sophia's TikToks kept coming, each one a dagger. One showed her tossing Mom's old curtains into a bonfire, captioned, "Decluttering the sad stepsister's junk, new vibes." She tagged me and the comments poured in, strangers laughing, calling me pathetic for clinging to a shack. Ethan was worse in his quiet way. I came home one day to find Mom's rocking chair on my apartment's curb, its arm splintered, a note taped to it. Oops, my bad. Victoria called constantly, her voice a mix of crocodile tears and veiled barbs. It's so hard managing Mark's legacy, she'd sigh. I wish you'd be more supportive, Caroline. It's what he would have wanted. Each call chipped away at me, making me question my own anger. Was I being unreasonable? Was I the one holding on to the past too tightly? Then my aunt called. Aunt Linda, Mom's sister who'd always been my rock. Caroline, she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. Victoria says you're causing trouble. You need to honor your father's wishes and support his new family. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. You're acting like a child. Don't be the black sheep. The line went dead and I sat there staring at my phone, the world blurring through tears. They'd turned even her against me. I felt like I was disappearing. At work, I was a ghost, my focus shot. My boss pulled me aside, asking if I was okay in that way that meant I wasn't. I needed something to hold on to, something real. So I turned to the puzzle box. It wasn't just a box, it was Dad's masterpiece. Its panels slid and clicked, each movement revealing another layer of complexity. I spent nights at my kitchen table, my engineer's mind mapping its mechanisms like a bridge under load. I measured angles, tested pressure points, sketched diagrams. It was like Dad was speaking to me through the wood, guiding my hands. One night, after hours of trial and error, a panel gave way with a soft click. My heart raced as a hidden compartment sprang open. Inside was a folded document, a USB flash drive, and a small, unfamiliar key. I unfolded the paper, my hands shaking. It was the deed to Whispering Pines, solely in my name, notarized and dated before Dad's marriage to Victoria. I stared at it, my grief giving way to a flicker of hope. This was no accident. Dad had planned this. I drove to Miss Hayes's office the next morning, the deed clutched in my hand like a lifeline. She adjusted her glasses, her face unreadable as she examined it. This is legitimate, she said finally. But brace yourself, Caroline. Victoria won't let this go without a fight. She was right. Within days, Victoria's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, produced a new will, dated after Dad's death, claiming everything went to Victoria and her kids. It was a forgery, sloppy in its details, but it didn't matter. They had money, connections, and a story that painted me as the greedy daughter obsessed with her father's death. A cease and desist letter arrived, threatening to contact my firm, to label me unstable, litigious, a liability. I could lose everything. My career, my reputation, my home. I spiraled. Nights blurred into days as I sat in my apartment, the puzzle box open but useless now. The USB drive taunted me. I couldn't crack its encryption. The key's purpose eluded me. My phone buzzed with texts from colleagues, their concern tinged with distance. My aunt didn't call again. I was alone, my anger replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Victoria's voice echoed in my head. Holding on to the past isn't healthy. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was fighting a losing battle. I hit rock bottom one rainy night, sitting on my couch with a bottle of wine I didn't drink. The grief for Dad wasn't just about his death anymore. It was about the betrayal of his memory, the way Victoria had twisted his legacy into something unrecognizable. I'd lost Whispering Pines, my family, my sense of self. I was no engineer now, just a woman drowning in her own powerlessness. The rain hadn't stopped in days, mirroring the fog in my head. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by Dad's old business files I'd pulled from storage, desperate for something, anything, to anchor me. The puzzle box sat open, its secrets half revealed. The deed, the USB drive, the key. I was stuck, and the weight of my failure pressed harder each day. That's when I found it. A yellowed contract from Reed Woodworks, Dad's old company, with a name scrawled in his handwriting, David Chen. Next to it, a note. David saw the truth. David Chen, Dad's former business partner. I vaguely remembered him from my childhood, a quiet man with a quick laugh, always bringing me licorice when he visited the cabin. Then he was gone, pushed out when Victoria entered the picture. I tracked him down through an old business card tucked in the file. He ran a small financial forensics firm now, a far cry from the thriving workshop he and Dad once shared. I called him, my voice shaking. He didn't hang up, but his tone was ice. "What do you want, Caroline?" I drove to his office in Tacoma, a cramped space above a coffee shop. David was older than I remembered, his hair streaked with gray, his eyes wary. "Your father chose her over our friendship," over honesty, he said, leaning back in his chair. Why should I care about his mess now? I didn't have an answer, so I placed the puzzle box on his desk. Its cedar scent filled the room, and I pointed to the inscription, the cornerstone. This is what he left me, I said. He called it that for a reason. You knew him, please. David's fingers traced the carvings, and for a moment his face softened. Cornerstone, he murmured. It was a term they'd used in their business. Integrity, the foundation of everything they built. He looked at me, really looked, and I saw a flicker of the man who'd once been Dad's friend. What's on the drive? He asked. I admitted I couldn't crack it. He sighed, long and heavy, then nodded. I'll take a look. For Mark? That night, I slept for the first time in weeks, a small spark of hope flickering in my chest. David was a stranger now, but he was also a bridge to Dad, a piece of the past that hadn't been erased. David called me 2 days later. Meet me at the cabin, he said, his voice tight with urgency. I drove up to Whispering Pines, the lake reflecting a bruised sky. David was waiting on the porch, his laptop open, the USB drive plugged in. You're not going to believe this, he said, and he was right. He'd cracked the encryption. The drive held a ledger, meticulous, damning. It detailed how Victoria had siphoned money from Reed Woodworks for years, funneling it into offshore accounts. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, drained while Dad struggled to keep the business afloat. She played him, David said, his voice bitter, and he let her, until he didn't. Then he played the audio files. The first was a fight, Dad's voice low and furious confronting Victoria. You've been stealing from me, from us, he said. I'm dissolving the partnership. You're out of the will. Victoria's response was a hiss, all charm gone. You'll regret this, Mark. The second file was worse, a voicemail Dad left for David the day he died. His voice was heavy, broken. I made a terrible mistake with her, David. I'm sorry, I'm fixing it, but I'm scared she won't let me walk away. The timestamp was hours before the storm hit. My hands shook as I listened. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was motive, raw and undeniable. I looked at David, his face grim. What about the key? I asked. He shook his head. Not a safe deposit box. I checked. Then it hit me. The marina. Dad's fishing boat, his sanctuary, was docked there. Victoria hated the water. She'd never think to look. We drove to the marina, the key burning a hole in my pocket. The locker was rusted, tucked behind a stack of life vests. I turned the key and the door creaked open. Inside was a folder with a life insurance policy, $2 million naming me as the sole beneficiary. But there was a clause: the payout was void if Dad's death was ruled a suicide or an accident tied to a pre-existing marital dispute. I stared at the paper, my mind racing. Dad hadn't just hidden the truth, he'd built a trap. David looked at me, his eyes steady. She thought she'd won, he said, but Mark was smarter than that. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Dad had left me the tools to fight, and David was here to help me wield them. I couldn't win in court, not yet. Victoria's lawyers were sharks, and a drawn-out case would bleed me dry. But the insurance policy, the ledger, the recordings, they were leverage. I needed to use them to make Victoria crack, so I devised a plan, one as precise as any blueprint I'd ever drafted. I had Miss Hayes send Victoria a letter. I'd relinquish all claims to Whispering Pines for a modest settlement and a few sentimental items. We'd meet at the cabin to sign the papers and do a final walkthrough. Victoria took the bait, probably thinking I'd finally broken. The meeting was set for Friday, and the weather forecast predicted a storm rolling in, just like the night Dad died. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent the week preparing. David helped me organize the evidence, backing up the ledger and recordings. I bought a small recording device, testing it until I was sure it would catch every word. The cabin became my staging ground. I walked its rooms, touching the beams Dad had carved, the fireplace where Mom used to read to me. This wasn't just a house, it was my family, my history. I wasn't letting Victoria take it. The day before the meeting, I stood on the porch, watching the lake churn under a darkening sky. Fear gnawed at me, not of Victoria but of failing Dad. What if she didn't crack? What if I lost everything? David found me there, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. Mark built this place to last, he said. So did he build you. His words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. Friday came, and the storm was building, wind rattling the windows. I placed the recording device on the mantel, hidden behind a photo of Mom and Dad. The puzzle box sat beside it, its key framed like a trophy. I was ready. The storm broke over whispering pines like a judgment, rain lashing the windows and wind howling through the pines. I stood in the living room, my heart pounding but my hands steady, the puzzle box on the mantel behind me. Victoria, Ethan and Sophia swept in, their coats dripping, their faces smug. Victoria's smile was all teeth, like a predator scenting an easy kill. "Caroline, dear," she said, shaking out her umbrella. "I'm so glad you've come to your senses." Ethan sprawled on the couch, his boots scuffing the hardwood Dad had polished for years. Sophia snapped a selfie, her lips pursed in a mock pout. "Last night in this dump," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear. I didn't take the bait. Instead, I gestured to the dining table where Miss Hayes's paperwork sat neatly stacked. "Let's get this over with," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. We sat, the air thick with tension and the scent of Victoria's perfume. I started softly, not with accusations but with memories. "This cabin," I said, my eyes on the beams above. "Dad built it for Mom, for us. I remember her reading to me by the fire, her voice so clear I can still hear it. This place was love, you know?" Sophia scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Get over it, Caroline, it's our house now." I ignored her, my gaze locking on Victoria. "You've changed it. The peonies, the photos, Mom's chair, all gone. Why?" Victoria's smile tightened, but she leaned forward, her voice patronizing. "We've made it our own, Caroline. You can't live in a museum." Ethan smirked, but I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Good." I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. "Before we sign," I said, "there's something you should hear." I pressed play, and Dad's voice filled the room, raw, broken, from the voicemail he'd left David. "I made a terrible mistake with Victoria. I'm fixing it, but I'm scared she won't let me walk away." The smugness drained from their faces. Victoria's hand froze midair, her nails glinting like claws. Ethan sat up, his jaw tight. Sophia's phone clattered to the table. "What is this?" Victoria snapped, her voice sharp now, no trace of sweetness. I didn't answer. Instead, I nodded toward the door as David Chen and Miss Hayes stepped inside, their faces grim. David held a folder, the ledger, printed and annotated. "Victoria," he said, his voice low, "you siphoned off millions from Mark's business. Offshore accounts, fake invoices, it's all here." Ethan lunged to his feet, his face red. "You're lying," he shouted, stepping toward David, but David, lean and steady, sidestepped him easily, and Ethan stumbled, catching himself on the couch. Miss Hayes raised a hand, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Sit down, young man, this is far from over." I pulled out the life insurance policy, sliding it across the table. $2 million, Victoria," I said, my voice steady now. "For me, unless Dad's death was tied to a marital dispute." "You got greedy. You made it look like an accident, didn't you? To void the policy, to keep it all." Her eyes widened just for a second before she schooled her face into a mask of outrage. "How dare you," she hissed. "You're delusional, Caroline," grasping at straws. But I wasn't done. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. "You killed him. You thought you'd won, but Dad was smarter than you. He left me everything I needed to bring you down." Her composure cracked, her lips trembling. The storm outside roared, a tree branch scraping the roof like a warning. "You have no proof?" She spat, but her voice wavered. I held her gaze. "Don't I?" I said softly. And then, because I'd planned for this, because Dad had taught me to build things that last, I let the silence stretch. Her eyes darted to the mantel where the puzzle box sat, its key framed beside it. She knew. She knew. "You're nothing," she screamed, her voice breaking, a torrent of rage and desperation. "Mark was going to leave me with nothing. I saved his pathetic business, and he dared to cut me out? I made it quick, Caroline. He didn't suffer, not like you will." The room went still. Ethan stared at his mother, his face pale. Sophia's hands covered her mouth. I felt a strange calm settle over me, like the eye of the storm. I reached for the mantel, my fingers brushing the hidden recording device I'd placed there. "Thank you, Victoria," I said quietly. "That's all I needed." The police came that night, their lights flashing through the rain. Victoria's confession, caught on my recorder, was enough to arrest her and Ethan, who'd known more than he'd let on. Sophia, for once, was silent, her bravado gone as she was led away for questioning. The cabin felt empty after they left, the storm still raging outside. I stood on the porch, letting the rain soak my hair, my clothes. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. The story broke the next day, a local sensation that spread like wildfire. Stepmother's betrayal at Whispering Pines, the headlines screamed. My phone buzzed with calls from my aunt, my cousins, people who'd turned their backs on me. I didn't answer. They didn't get to come back now, not after they'd believed Victoria's lies. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Whispering Pines was mine again, but it was haunted, not by ghosts but by the echoes of what had happened. The gravel path mocked me, the boathouse stood half dismantled, and the air still carried the faint sting of Victoria's perfume. I couldn't stay there, not like this, but I couldn't let it go either. 6 months later, I was back. The air smelled of sawdust and fresh soil, not deceit. I'd hired Mr. Tucker, an old friend of Dad's who'd helped him build the cabin years ago, to restore the boathouse. We worked side by side, sanding beams, hammering nails, rebuilding what Ethan had torn apart. I replanted Mom's peonies, their roots sinking into the earth like a promise. The cabin was coming back to life, and so was I. One afternoon my niece Lily came to visit. She was 8, all curiosity and bright eyes, her hair in pigtails. I showed her how to use a wood-burning tool, guiding her small hands as she carved her initials into a block of cedar. We sat on the porch swing, the one Dad had carved with MR+ER for him and Mom. Lily traced the letters with her finger. "What's this mean?" she asked, her voice soft. I looked out at the lake, calm now, reflecting the late afternoon sun. "It means family," I said, my voice catching. "And it means builders. You and I, we're builders, Lily." She grinned, clutching her carved block like a treasure. I smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't felt in years. The grief was still there, a quiet ache, but it wasn't all I was anymore. I stood and walked to the edge of the porch, my hands on the railing Dad had carved. The lake stretched out before me, its surface smooth, unbroken. I'd weathered the storm, Victoria's lies, the betrayal, the loss. Whispering Pines was mine, not just as a house but as a legacy. Dad had left me the cornerstone, not just in the puzzle box but in me, his strength, his craft, his love. I wasn't done building, not by a long shot. My father's puzzle box taught me that the most important thing he left behind wasn't the cabin, but the strength he built within me. When you feel like you've lost everything, look for your own cornerstone, that unbreakable piece of integrity, love, or memory that no one can take from you. The greatest battles are won not with anger, but with the quiet resolve to rebuild. What's the cornerstone that keeps you strong? Share your story in the comments below, and let's remind each other of the power we all hold inside.